let's dive right into this. Oh, I can pop out chat. Interesting. Let's do that because that makes a lot of sense. And chuck you there. Normally I'd be a lot better set up for this, but you know, not today. Files. MRZ. Cool. Now if I do that, we've got instructions, which is good. So let's start with that and see what we're going to do. So we're going to start with the rear section by the looks of things. So let's go desktop over that so you can see the screen a bit better. And for some reason that's there, even though we're not using it. That's the view I'm looking for. Cool, so let's start breaking this open. I've already done an unboxing, if you're interested in what comes with it. I've already taken some parts out, but we're mainly going to be building this with the parts that it comes with, so it means I'm going to be using all the built-in sandpapers, and, well, not all the built sandpapers. I've actually got some proper Tamiya sandpapers and finishing abrasives, because I need the finer grain stuff. So I need like the 2000 grit and whatnot these days for diffs and things, so we might end up using these. Hopefully they don't foul as easily as these cheap sandpapers, but we'll be using the drill bit and the Allen keys on here, and I've got one of the screwdrivers handy, so hopefully that'll be all we need. But I've got other things like a rubber mallet and pliers and everything as we go, just in case. So I can put this box over here. And that always does look weird. There we go. We're not going to need you. Yeah, group might need you. We're going to need you very, very shortly. Not going to need you guys immediately. Not going to need the diff. It's a brass chassis. We'll leave it in there because it's easy to find. And we've got the springs in there. And that's all front stuff. So that leaves us with side struts and screws. Shims. Screws, rear golden motor holder setup. I'm going to be using a 55,000 kV motor on this because that's what I have laying around, and I've finally got the carbon fiber pieces as well here. So open bag 1 through to 5. So this is bag 5. That's bag 7. So I'm going to put that aside. Bag 1, 2, 3, and bag 12. So I need bag 4 as well. Bag 4 happens to be the brass chassis, which is a weird one. Having a look at it here, it might be this rear plastic bit that I want out of there. So just by eyeballing it, it seems I grabbed all the right bags anyway. While I'm doing that, I'm going to chuck that there. Just a bit of quick reorganization. There we go. So let's start by grabbing the rear plate that everything screws into. And I do have the chat popped out this time, so if someone does say something, I should be able to notice it a lot quicker, which has always been a problem in the past. Now I suspect we're only going to go for an hour or two here, and hopefully that'll get us past the 50% point. Put that away. Now we just need screws and balls. So there's some ball heads in here. And some heads in there, that's good. Now, are we using shims? We are using shims. So I need some shims from there, and I think we need the screws from here. Okay. So as I did comment in my build video, they are still using a lot of screws, but a lot less than in the past. Oh, does it come off? Maybe it does. If the battery goes in there, that'd be brilliant. Oh yes, a battery does go in there. Awesome. So why does that not light up automatically? Maybe that battery is dead. No, it's not. Okay, cool. So I did pick up a new pair of calipers with a solar panel because I do run out of batteries on these, and I have found that just by shining a torch on this I can light it back up, but luckily this one has a battery in it, so let's get started. We're going to start with, actually I might start with the plastic bit there. Now it's going to be interesting to see where that one is, which bag that's actually located in. Maybe that was in that bag I just chucked back. In fact, there's a screw in here, which is a bit odd. There's 2 screws in here. Okay, that might be the retention for that then. So this appears to just be all carbon fibre pieces. So maybe plastic pieces in here with the arms. No, that's not in there. Well, this is off to a pretty bad start. Oh, okay, it's in with the chassis, that's why they want you to open that chassis. So I'm going to take out 2 pieces. Actually, I'll take out all of the pieces. I do find it weird that there's 2 screws in the brass chassis already. That seems a bit odd, but I guess for securing it in place that's sufficient. Whatever. Put that bag to the side, because at the end of this you end up with a pile of bags. Okay, so let's do a test fit here. Okay, and this is an asymmetrical part, so we have to make sure it protrudes, it just sticks in like that, as you can see there. That's a pretty good fit, so that's really, really nice to see as we start. So what are we looking for? We're looking for Phillips heads that are 2x4s. And they are tapered. So let's just quickly check this bag. Okay, that doesn't have any. It's got some specialist parts in there that are screwish like, but I think the 2x4s we actually get them from here. Now, I haven't built anything in a while, so my ability to guess sizes is going to be quite badly off. So I'm just going to start by measuring everything. So it's 2 deep, so I need twice the height of that. These ones should actually stand out a bit because they're also Phillips heads. So from what I've seen from the manual, those should all be black as well. So 2x4, that might be a 2x4. So after thinking about the manual for a bit overnight and noticing that some of the screws are black and some are silver, so that side's black and that side's silver, I think the black ones are self-taping or tapping, or however you say it, which may be an important distinction. And the reason why they're not all just same. Screw it. I'm just going to take them out here. Working out which screw is which in a bag is always more difficult than it needs to be. So if you ever are looking for something cheap to get, a box like this is a really, really good addition. A little magnet at the top here. I'll just put all these screws in there, although as you can see I've got a stack of magnets with the screws stuck to it. I've got half a dozen of them and they're always handy when I remember to use them, and I don't always remember to use them, unfortunately. Bit hard to say what is a 2x4. Well, I'm looking for something that is tapered. So I'm just realizing now that if I'm struggling on this part to find the right screws, this might be what is the slowest part of this build. I thought it would have been obvious, but I'm just going to take that. Or actually, let's measure the outside of that. So to tip that is... That's not right, let's zero that out. 3.6, and what's the diameter? 2.5, 1.4, okay. 2 of those. Now, is there anything larger than that? Screw sizes never seem to be accurate. So close enough is sometimes the correct one. Yep, alright, we're going to go with that. I can always undo them later. Okay, that's going in fairly well actually. Plastic seems fairly solid. Not the best plastic I've ever dealt with, but by no means is it the worst, so that's always a good sign. Like, I feel like I could back this screw out and go back in a couple of times and it would still be tight, so I always consider that to be a very, very good starting sign. Okay, so let's get this 3.5mm ball end in. Now, from memory, they're large, and in fact, do we want to split these up? Yes, we will. I might use a clear plastic container here just to do that. Now, you don't actually need to split them up like I'm doing here. I'm just making it a bit faster for identification of parts later. Basically, because the screws are in a separate bag and ball ends are in a separate bag, you could just mix them together and still be able to tell them apart. So I'm going to call that a 3.5mm ball end, and we can measure that. It says 1.6. Maybe it's the length of the ball screw. So total length, it's 4.9. It's 3. But there's nothing else really in that category. Let's go with that one then. Bum, 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 bum. I have thought about getting some good licensed background music for these streams. It is the new year, so maybe I'll go off and consider that again. It's not hard to do, it's just getting the setup work for it is the difficult part. Let's go for the long ways, that works well. And we just screw that in, making sure we keep it straight. Now there is, if you are having trouble getting this in, there are some tricks you can do. You can ream the edges out slightly, that makes it grip a bit better and allows you to line it up a bit better, but the general trick is to keep it straight once you do have it going in. You don't need much force, it seems. This is going in pretty well and pretty straight on its own. So, and just as you're twisting it in, rotate it 90 degrees just to make sure it's going in right. Once it hits a certain point, it should self-right, but it is possible for these things to go in at an angle and then stay crooked right until they're all tight and tighten all the way up. So it's easy just to, if you see it or feel it going in crooked, back it out and try again. How far are we in? 13 minutes. Okay, so this does actually feel a bit loose. I know that's going all the way in and it's not coming out, but it also felt like it was just spinning in the spot. So hex flat bit M2.5s. Now I'm going to assume 2.4s, so I'm going to assume those are those. And we're going to do a quick test fit just to make sure. Yes, that protrudes, a bit hard to see, but you can see a tiny bit of silver at the top there, and that it's sticking through the chassis. So if you're worried that the screw is too small, just put it in and make sure there's a bit of protrusion. And from here we can see that it should protrude through that 0.5mm washer and slightly into the screw. In fact, you can see it doesn't go all the way to the top here. So we need the ball heads for that, which are going to be... Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that not all ball heads are identical, In this build it looks like they are, but sometimes they're flanged at the bottom down here and may have a hex bit down the bottom. These ones are just straight through ones. So. And with the flanged ones it normally goes beyond the outer circumference of the circle bit so that you can get a one of these tools on top, down, and then tighten it up. So, or tighten a screw against it. We're going to need this bag. As you can see, here's a plastic spacer I 3D printed. I still haven't used that, unfortunately, but they are special spacers for in between the wheel bearings on the MA020 and MR03. And what they do is, normally the wheels, the bearings in a wheel have a little air gap on them. At least the center part of the bearing has a bit of an air gap in between them. And if you tighten them too tightly, that pushes the bearings slightly off center. So you've got this weird two conflicting things where you want it as tight as possible, but if you go too tight, the wheels don't rotate. If you put one of those spacers in, then you can tighten it to your heart's content, and it keeps them properly spaced apart. And it keeps the wheel very, very, very solid. So, still playing around with that. That one came out well, but the majority of them came out really, really poorly. So it turns out with 3D resin printing, there is a potential that small parts will actually warp, and I suspect it has to do with the temperatures of the curing process you're using. So I used very, very high temperatures for very, very long periods of time. Because I was doing a bigger print before that one, a bigger print as part of that one, and it did cause the small parts to warp quite badly. So lessons learned on that one. I'll get back to that in the future, but picked that off another channel. Someone was doing that sort of thing and made some. Although I'm pretty sure they used a traditional 3D printer and not a resin printer. There we go. So I'm going to call that a fairly easy step, but one thing to note is that that was the first page and it's taken us almost 13 minutes to get to this point. So time-wise, this is going a lot slower than I'd like. Now the other problem with these smooth ball heads is it's very hard to get any grip on them and therefore tighten them up. I may have to resort to some tricks. I don't think that's the right hex bit either. Oh no, it is. Okay. So as you might have noticed from my little hammer earlier, I have picked up some new tools. One of them are these new pliers, but they've got plastic on the inside there so that you can grip parts without marking them. And given that this is a pivot point, it's a really good idea not to mark them or have any flat spots. So you don't want to accidentally indent them by using normal pliers on them. It's not an essential part, but I'm doing enough custom build stuff these days that it's really, really handy. They're great for assembling and disassembling shocks. Although I've got a dedicated shock tool as well. This is not easy to do. I'm not the most coordinated today. Let's have a closer look at that. Actually, let's start on the other one and just see if I've made a mistake putting it together. Maybe it's in an angle or something like that. I find it funny, the light on camera is better than the light I have actually at my end at the moment. Everything appears a lot brighter and more colourful, which was different the other day. It was the other way around. There was more light available here than there was on camera. Alright. So I think I just have put that other one in incorrectly. So we'll just back that out and try again. If we can work out how. There we go. Screw it back in. Feels like it's tightening. Let's feel it. No. So if you're having a lot of trouble, sometimes it's just easy to swap the parts out, which is what I'm going to do here. Just in the name of speed. As you can see, I'm throwing stuff around because I'm mightily uncoordinated today. Don't know what it is, but some days. There you go. So I'm going to swap two of those parts. So the ball head and the screw. Okay, that's much better. I can do this just with my fingers and it's not shifting around at all. So I can just now grip it and tighten it up with the hex bit. Like so. Now just because I have the plastic bits on there, it isn't actually any grippier. You may actually have to squeeze down quite tightly with the pliers just to get the forces you need to tighten it up. Okay, and they're tight. Okay, that's done. Now it doesn't look like it on here, but that part is actually pretty asymmetrical. As you can see, the gears for the motor actually go down there. So, like most rear mounts, leave 1mm gap. Good thing I picked that up. Okay, and I do have to back that out in that case. There we go, 1mm. So I've got to make sure I read everything, and I did complain about this in part in the manuals in that things are weirdly highlighted, like they highlight the dimension here, but then they mention that that's a hex and then that's Phillips. It's all over the place. There's no consistency. Like they've tried to highlight the important information, but in doing so they've lost the meaning of something that's important or not. Okay, oh well, we're already onto the that part there. So this needs some extra parts. Here we go. So this I thought was interesting. It's a carbon fiber. Well, they say glass fiber, but I think they've just cut it all out of carbon fiber. There you go, like a U shape. And that goes into the, well, I was going to say it goes in the channel, but the more important part is that this back part just slides into the top there. And that's why you need that 1mm spacing, because it obviously has some, this might be asymmetrical as well, yeah. Because it grips the other side, so that's why you need the 1mm so that it can move back and forward like that. So the entire rear suspension can move up and down. So that actually moves pretty smoothly. But it does look like this is asymmetrical, so if you're putting this together and it doesn't seem to fit on the rear bit here, try just rotating it 180 degrees. So we'll put that there. What does that want? That wants a Phillips heads as well. And this is going to be a tight fit. Oh, this is a very, very tight fit. So the paint on this has actually changed the dimensions. So you could get away by filing either side here, or just putting a lot of pressure in. I'm going to go with the extra pressure. I'm actually kind of annoyed that they did not provide a plastic version of this for the people who want like a lighter weight version. Didn't think this would be handy, but it turns out it's useful already. Okay. Yeah, the paint they've used on this has really affected the dimensionality of the chassis. And in fact, is that chassis flat? Oh yeah, it is. Okay. There's a slight wobble to it. I suspect there's a high point there, and that it's twisting like that, but yep, that's what it is. These ends are bouncy. But nothing enough for me to care about. I mean, if I really wanted to, how would I bend this back? Probably go like that and put a bit of force in the chassis. And then do the chassis again. Yeah, I could keep on going with that for ages, but I don't need it exactly perfect, and it's close enough. Like, we're talking about less than half a mil here. So now we need those tapered 2.4 mils. So these ones, definitely looks like those ones. Let's dig into the back there. Just using my chin to line the screw and the screwdriver up. Good old chin. Chin MVP for tooling. Yep, these are the right screws. And I mean, another thing to consider is it might just be the paint that they've put on this brass chassis that's causing it to be not level when it's on the surface, when the actual chassis itself may be actually level. So until we get some wheels onto this thing, like, it's small enough that you'll be able to compensate for it in the suspension anyway, if you needed to. But if you are building this, definitely put it on a flat piece of something, preferably glass, because glass tends to be self-flattening. Or a sheet of carbon fiber if you've got it. I actually have bought some carbon fiber 20 by 20 centimeter sheets as samples, and they make great calibration boards, but I was just testing the thickness and strength of them. But I do use them for testing how flat things are as well. Very, very handy for that. So this is a similar setup where we've got the M24 hexes. M24, is it really an M24 though? I'm really worried I'm picking the wrong screws here. Is that an M24? I could go with something longer, but there's nothing longer that's also a hex piece, so it's sort of a weird position to be in. Oh, I'll grab two of those then. Okay, now we need the spacers again. And I'm picking out spacers at random, because it really does feel like a grab bag of parts, although I'm going to quickly measure 0, let's say 0.3, but is there a thicker one? Maybe that's it. Put that there. All the boring stuff for this chassis. Oh well, I've dropped it. And that battery doesn't appear to be working. Like, I think it's actually just lighting up purely off the lighting I have available, which is entertaining. So that means I need, once again, more CR2032 batteries. I need to go off and buy about 100 of those. Always running out when I need them. Okay. Okay, put one of them on. And then we put the screw head on, or the ball head. I must say, the one interesting thing about this brass chassis is, obviously, it's a lot heavier. But it feels like, it actually feels like there's something there. The carbon fiber is so light sometimes that it doesn't quite feel real. Like, you definitely notice that you've got a brass chassis in your hand with this one. Very, very interested to see how the adding the extra weight actually makes the car handle in the turns. Normally I wouldn't put any extra weight in my chassis, although seeing it used more and more, like you have a look at the GLD, the GLF, the F1 car from GL Racing, and they actually have the option to add weights to the chassis, as well as on their GLR. And some of the other higher end chassis are actually having that option as well. So it seems counterintuitive that you'd want to add weight, but I guess if you're just concerned about maintaining speed through the corners, then the fact that it might take you a bit longer to get up to speed doesn't really matter as much. Okay, so now these flathead screws I suspect are the screws that are in this bag, the carbon fiber bag. So let's just have everything fall out here. And yes, I can see the carbon fiber piece. And the screws do appear to go straight through on that one. So we're going to use these screws as they are flatheads. So I'm going to put that aside and put everything back again. Really, really wish there was somewhere to race some of these chassis in Sydney. I've got a lot of vehicles now and not a lot of opportunities to test them out and race against other people. Now these are hex bits, and we need to work out which hex screwdriver they are. And they are this smaller screwdriver, or smaller Allen key. No, actually, wow. They look like it. They're actually screw Phillips heads. Yeah, but if I have a look at the instructions, they do say Phillips heads. So now this is pretty hard to put in. I guess I'm fighting against carbon fiber here, and you've got to remember that carbon fiber will blunt things, including saw bits. So more importantly, you want to make sure that this is all smooth and loose. So I'm going to tighten it until it's too tight and then just back them off slightly. So that's as tight as they'll go, and they could do with half a turn. So there you go, and they're back to being loose again. So it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, the carbon fiber will cause excessive wear and tear on the screws, but on the other hand, it means it will retain the screws, so you can back them off half a turn, they're not going to come back out. You don't need any Loctite or anything like that. To make sure the motor plate can what? I'm going to assume they mean pivot back and forward like that. And we are going to play around with that and just see what we can do there. Okay, so you can adjust the amount of flex it has by tightening and loosening that. It's kind of cool. How much do I want? I'd actually say that's plenty. In fact, I don't think my bottom screws are done up tight enough, so let's go back to that. And that over time should loosen itself up. Unfortunately, it's going to be the carbon fibre rubbing against the ball and wearing that out slightly. And well, in fact, that's already sort of resolved itself, but it'll hit a point where it won't get any worse. So that's looking good. I'll just tighten up the top again, just make sure everything is good. Yep. I don't like doing it on camera too much, but don't be afraid to just spend way too much time tuning and fiddling and shaving and filing and getting everything accurate. In fact, that can be some of the most fun part of building these chassis, but watching it on stream obviously isn't nearly as entertaining. So we'll now put those links in, which will be cool. Which will, that's most of the rear suspension done, would you believe? This is kind of why I like this design of chassis, because they go together really, really well. And you know what's I just noticed then is that goes on a lot better than on the GLR. The GLR on this side actually had that go down too far, and I'm pretty sure it was related to me shaving down the ball heads a bit too much. But I didn't have any ball heads at the end to compensate or correct for that. Yeah, that's interesting. Why won't that stay in? There we go. And that's actually twisting and not staying in place, so I might have to bring the chassis out a bit, as you can see on the screen. It's just actually 3 pivot points. You've got a pivot point there, there, and there, and they all actually have to be aligned. Now the issue is that this pivot point is either too far forward or too far back. So those are in line and this is not, and that's causing it to flex in, up or down. And given that this appears to be flexing up, I'd say I've got it in too far. So we're just going to back that out a bit. And what'll happen is it will get more in line with the chassis. In fact, I'll show you the side view. You should see it start to flick back in as I loosen this all up. Hardest part's getting into the pin itself. Maybe I'll do it this way. There we go. It's getting a bit better. Maybe I have to go in the other direction though. Yeah, it's going in the wrong direction. So if you watch the plate at the rear there, it's getting a bit better. Oh, come on. This is all so fiddly. Not in a bad way, but I mean from a content producer's point of view, like producing videos for you guys to watch, this is a bit I would love to cut out if I wasn't doing it live. There we go. So it's still flicking a bit, so we're nearly there. Oh, so close. You can feel it because you feel a really, really distinct clicking feeling as it clicks from left to right. Once that's gone, you know you're in a good place, and then you can just line the front and the back up to get it 100% accurate and where you want it to be. Right, there we go. So we can now see it's flicking up and down, and it's twisting and not clicking at all. So if I have a look at the side, see if I can you can see it flicks up very, very smoothly, and it's not twisting at all when it does that. So there's a lot of resistance there, so I'd say I'm very, very close, but not perfect. And I think we only need half a twist to fix that. So let's see what that does. That's made it click more. Okay, so it was actually pretty close. So now rather than clicking left to right, it's actually clicking up and down, which is what we don't want. So I'm now going to go half a twist in the other direction and see if it gets better or worse. Got slightly better, which is good. We basically want the end to be as free as possible. So we're going to go half a twist in that same direction. And then if that gets worse, we'll go back the other direction in quarters. Yeah, that clicking is back, but I suspect if we go a quarter back, we should be perfect. Yep. I'd even go so far as to call that loose at the back end. So that's perfect now. Awesome. Okay, so now we need some plastic bits, and I'm going to prematurely pull out another piece we're going to be using, which is the bit that holds the body. This is bag 7. I keep on forgetting that they tell you which bags to open, which is really, really nice. I just need to be paying attention. Now, interesting, it looks like there's 4 of these pieces, which would be incredibly interesting if there are 4, because as I've said already, I think these are the same parts that are on the BZ3. And if that's the case, that means the reusability of parts has just gone up even more. I don't think enough manufacturers really spend enough time on trying to reuse parts. Like, there definitely seems to be attempts to, but sometimes you have to make compromises. A good example of this is the MO20 versus the MA020 versus the MA3030. Like the 030 looks very, very similar, but most of the parts are off by about 0.5 millimeter, which is absolutely infuriating. That's it. So they do reuse these plastic parts, which is good. It definitely makes putting these things together a lot easier. Screw goes through there and the pin goes through that side. So you want to look at the bottom, or actually it probably tells you better at the bottom. So you can see that there's 2 holes here. The hole on the inside is larger than the hole on the outside. The hole on the outside, the smaller hole takes a pin on this little plastic piece, and the other one is tapered for the screw. So if you don't know which direction it goes in and you're not looking at the instructions, you can just have a look at the underside of the chassis. Looks like these need a bit of force, so I'm going to use my hammer again. It's probably a bit loud on the stream, I just realised. Once again, it's the paint causing this. Might even just use the pliers this time to squeeze it in. There we go. This is where the plastic covered ones are good, because they won't leave a mark on the plastic at all. Probably one of the better tools I picked up, like RC Mart was having a special, and I just picked up a whole lot of different tools for different things, because I needed a couple of specialist tools for my larger scale cars, and they've proven to be very, very helpful in building the smaller scale ones as well. especially the Tamiya stuff. The Tamiya tools are exceptionally high quality. Can be a bit pricey, but trust me, the racing stuff tends to break down pretty quickly. They're not bad, but they're definitely nowhere near the best. They're a great budget option, is probably the most diplomatic way I can go about saying it. Now that's interesting. The holes don't actually line up there. That's incredibly interesting. Ah, you know why? Because I was not reading the instructions. That says, if I scroll down, these wavy bits should be upwards. And guess which direction I put them in? Makes a lot of sense. Pins go in. And they also seem to go in a bit better if you do it that way as well. Well, lesson learned. Back to the pliers. In fact, these have a very, very nice trick in which you go, yeah, now they don't fully close like that, but allows you to get two parallel surfaces for clamping things like this down. There we go. And then turn them back to normal clamping ones, just with a quick flick of the wrist. Okay, now what do we want? We want 2x4 flip screws. So now, no, it's these ones, so they're definitely not 2x4s. It's just that plastic bit so everything lines up. I find the best way to do this is to actually put the screwdriver in the hole and force it through, and then adjust the plastic piece. Or if you've got a pin or something, put it in there and then just rattle it around until it feels like it's in the center. It's a lot more accurate than you'd think it was doing it that way. And then we just twist in. Now that has popped up slightly, so I'm just going to squeeze it back in. Actually, I might do the other one and then we will clean it up a bit more. So you definitely want to be applying force from the top as you're tightening. Yep, oh, that one went in a lot better. It just prevents the pin on the outside from popping out. Just makes things a bit easier. Yep, that's it. And then if it does pop out and you do need to pop it back in, make sure you give it an additional twist after that, because there's a potential that when it popped out and you thought it was tight, once you pop it back in, there's still a bit more for it to go in. So, and these are directional as well. Now this is going to be a bit more difficult, and I'll show you why in a second. But we're going to clip this in first. But basically, actually I will show you first, the screws are down here, right? But there's no way for the screwdriver to really sit flat, and the screwdriver is not long enough, so you're going to have to come into an angle. And especially with Phillips heads, that's always a really annoying thing to do. In fact, if I was redesigning these instructions, I'd screw in this before I screwed in that. So I'd actually do instruction 6 before instruction 5, because you will get better results. It'll be easier to go in and a bunch of other things. You won't have issues with the screwdriver going in an angle then. Okay, that's flat. Grab those two. So when you're screwing at an angle like this, the amount of pressure you put on the screw is actually pretty important. It's a lot easier to slip out when you're screwing at an angle. And so you may have to put double, nearly triple the amount of strength into the screw as you're twisting so it doesn't come out. See if I can show you. You can see the angle that it's going in there. That's not too bad, but anything more than that and you'll be in trouble quite badly. So I'm actually not putting too much additional strength in there, but if it was another, say, 5 degrees, I'd be putting nearly double or triple the strength into it. So just tightening it up, and then it's slipping out, so that's in securely. And now we just use our thumb to try and move that back and forward, and it's barely shifting. We'll just tighten this side a bit more. The other thing to note is that if you do, once you tighten up one side, do the other. So I'd actually go screw that side in and screw that side in, then retighten that and then retighten that. But I can feel those are both in pretty set at the moment, so I think we're good. Awesome. So we're now on to page 5 out of 24. So we're about a fifth of the way through, and I'm hoping to get to at least a quarter of the way through. We're coming up to 52 minutes now. So we could probably make it to halfway if I do the full 2 hours, but we'll see how I go over the next, or how I feel over the next couple of pages. Okay, this is interesting. Yeah, so maybe I do 6 and 7 before I did 5. No, 5 and 7 before I did 6. No, sorry. Now I'm really confused. Complete steps 6 and 7, so putting these bumps into the back of this carbon fiber plate before you actually screw the plate itself down. That'd be the way to do it. You'll be in for a lot less of a headache if you do it that way. I'm going to pull out the gold parts here as well because we're going to need them shortly. Because we'll be working on the rear very, very shortly. I just want to take a second to look at this. So this looks like gold-plated aluminium. And these are very, very flat, but the quality of these parts is pretty good. I'd even go as far as to say they're slightly above average from what I've seen out of Atomic in the past. So I mean, the one thing that's definitely sticking out with this Atomic kit is a lot of the issues I've complained about in the past. So really bad carbon fiber parts and brass cutouts and everything don't seem to be present this time around. So I don't know if they've paid attention and gone back on this, but I think we'll find out more when we deal with the front suspension setup, because that has traditionally always been a bit of a poor point for them. In particular, the upper steering arms were something they always used to have misaligned or not cut out properly, like they were tapered rather than parallel. Wow, I don't even know how to get this part in properly. Is that really the way it goes in? Pins on the outside, okay. Waves go down. Doesn't really fit in though. Maybe I will need to use pliers here. Oh hey, HyperArc. I'd completely stopped paying attention to chat, which I probably shouldn't have. Yeah, kind of glad I get to finally build this vehicle. It's it would have been a week or two ago, but visiting family and everything. That's not really sort of my thing. So these pins are particularly painful. Like That's probably the worst part I've seen on this design so far. I think you might be able to do it by building it out of order, but I think you're still going to have complications. I think the amount of space around this part of the chassis is just not adequate for what they're trying to achieve, and so it's going to be a tight fit either way. These plastic coated screwdrivers are really, really, really helpful though. Didn't think they'd be quite as useful on this build as they have been. Okay, so we want just the M24s here. It's a flathead that's not tapered. Script A tapered. Wow, the live on camera looks so much better as well. Really got those color temperatures down. It's always nice when that happens. Screw that in. Now the other interesting thing is I'm building this as an M787B. My GLR is a 787B as well. And this won't exactly be an apples to apples comparison because I've got a stupidly fast motor on the GLR. But this one will probably be a bit more of a balanced, bit slower in terms of top speed, but the idea is it will stay flatter in the corners and hopefully not get nearly as much, or I was going to say as much, not as bad torque steer as the 12,000 kV motor does in the GLR. That thing you have to come on the acceleration so slowly because otherwise the thing just spins out. Which means, and you also need the space for it, and I definitely don't have the space for it, but it's definitely there's a lot of finesse to that drive. I don't know if anyone's noticed it either, but I've got a particularly bad burn there on my finger. Accidentally ended up gripping a soldering iron that was at 450 degrees Celsius. And it actually ran along the entire side of the finger, but I gripped it quick enough and knocked it so it was only got that mark. But that was rather painful for a couple of days. So be careful around soldering irons is all I can say. M24s, and then doing the hex bits. So these are asymmetrical as well. So that goes on that side. Pins go on the inside. These have pins going down. One hole hangs over the edge, just like that. And I'm assuming one pin hangs over the edge like that as well. So we need 4 of the M24s. Now these are silver screws. I am getting a tad bit annoyed about that hex piece. So we might just quickly look for a screwdriver piece that I can use. So that might be a bit too big, I think. Yeah. Whoops. Unfortunately, all my screw pieces are all over the place. All my screwdriver pieces are all over the place at the moment, so yeah, that's not the right size either. There we go. So I guess we're stuck with the screwdriver, or the hex Allen key thingamajig. We know where that goes now, so we'll put this through here. So I've always found it interesting that this hobby is very much about gripping the parts in a way that makes sense, or in the only way that you can. Once you've got one screw in, it's a lot easier, but up until that point, getting that initial screw in can be kind of interesting. Now this is aluminium on aluminium, so you actually might want to Loctite that. But there's a couple of ways we can go about that, and I'll show you a technique in a second and how you can get that sorted. So this time I'm going to go for a different technique. Come on, screw drop out, there we go. Okay, for screws of this size, it can be very, very hard to apply Loctite directly to them. However, as this is going into a, or these are recessed, you can half screw them out, insert Loctite underneath them, and then screw them back in as a way to keep them in. Just going to see how much they tighten and determine if I need to actually Loctite them up. Okay, these get reasonably tight. There we go. M26s. M26, no. It's probably that one. Now we need tweezers. How do these go on? So let's do that. Get these lined up. Oops. It's a good way to lose parts. Build a stack. Okay, let's cheat. Grab my magnets. Put some magnets on the back. And let me guess. Oh no, they are magnetic. Okay, cool. This is one part I really particularly hate. When you've got calibration plates like this, or spacers, and then you've got to bolt them between a part, especially if there's no recess here, and I don't think there is a recess. No, there isn't. Okay. So it's even more dangerous. So I have to think about how we keep these in as we put the aluminium piece in the top there. So it's one thing to get it in like that. It's another to work out how you can keep them in place. First thing we should do though is test the hex bit is right for these parts, and they are. Okay. So we're going to go for the lot of force approach, which is hard because that back piece bends. And I would actually face it more towards the camera, but this is going to be a bit difficult as is. Oh, that goes in from the top, okay. Given this goes in from the top, that actually does make it easier. If you have to put the spacers in and flip the part over, that's when it becomes incredibly difficult. But you're still going to want to apply pressure to the top here, in case you slip with your other hand. Alternatively, you can probably pre-screw this top bit in with the screws just a bit, and then push the spacers in from the side, just line them up. So what you do is you'd have that pre-screwed in, you put the top down, and then you push the spacers in from the side, just so that they're resting up in the right place. Right. So that's in, they're not tight, we're now just going to tighten them while I'm pushing the sides in, just for the sake of making sure the spacers are aligned, which they aren't on this side. There we go. Now the other thing to note is that they're actually coming out 1/2 mil at the bottom, and I don't know if that's going to become vital, because I suspect this plastic bit in... Oh, okay, so this diffuser actually hooks on the back of that and then has other screws to retain it. Okay, that's no big issue. It's kind of cool actually. Motor mount low. So that needs to be an M29. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Which bag is that? That is bag 8. And this is bag 8, isn't it? Oh, actually, they're battery holders. I can put them here. Take these parts out. I'm going to need the lock nuts as well. Now the lock nuts in here. No, they are not. So I'm going to put this bag back. That looks like a lock nut. Should be another lock nut in here somewhere. Make sure I remove the magnets. I've got a lot of plastic lock nuts in here, although those look like silver ones. Ah, here it is. Okay. Doesn't matter, I think I've got enough of those lock nuts anyway. And I need the M29s, which... I'm going to assume are those, and we'll just quickly measure them just to be sure. Once again, I'm just going to take close enough. Yeah. Yeah, close enough. So these go on the little recessed part. And then we then screw that down. Now hopefully the screwdriver goes over the top, and it does. Perfect. So that means I can just put this part down here. Now these have to be tight because the lock nut does not retain the plastic part. The plastic part uses this as a worm gear to go up and down. So we tighten this lock nut onto the chassis as much as possible so it doesn't move. There we go, that's tightening up. So it looks like I have already used some parts above and beyond what they supply. So just a word of warning on that. Make sure you've got everything you need. So just like that. And then, as you can see in the, well, you can't see it in the picture, so let me scroll up a bit. They do say to leave about 1 mil here. So this plastic thing is a, it just provides an offset. And just like I was wondering when I was doing the manual review, I did assume that I would be able to tighten and untighten these with just my finger alone without any additional tools or anything, and that does actually look like that's the case. So that is a pretty big win in my book. The oversized flanges I put on there have definitely been worth it. So we do the same on this side. So what I do is I screw the nut down to retain it, and once it's retained, put the hex bit in the bottom, and then we start tightening it down with the other tool. do a drift. I wish I could at the moment. Just having a look at my drift track at the moment, I've got too much crap sitting on top of it. Well, I'll tell you what, I've been playing with the XV01 as of late, and man does that drift. That drifts like freaking crazy. And the other one that drifts really well is a new WL Toys buggy. Wow, does that... Do I have it handy? No, it's in the kitchen. I may have upgraded that to a stupidly torquey motor, and it may hold a drift without even having to think about it. In fact, it holds a drift so well that you have to actually put effort into not drifting it. So that's been a super awesome build. Oh, why did that come loose? I'll have to redo that one then, I think. Bum, bum, bum. There we go. May even want to Loctite this these things. Just looking at how they're set up. Can that be rotated anymore? No, that should be fine. It actually looks like you might want to put the screw, get it fixed in the slot first. In fact, I'm going to try that. Just if you don't do that, it looks like you lose about 1 millimeter worth of tweaking. And I don't want to really miss out on that. So I can rotate it like this. Tiny bit more. Maybe not. Unfortunately, it's stupid little things like this that can make the difference in the end. So, come on, get on top of it. God, it's not even the great weather to go outside and drift at the moment. I've got such a wonderful park to go drifting in, and completely soaked at the moment. Oh yeah, that seems pretty flat. Why is that not capturing like that? Let's put that in there. Yeah, getting your hand movements right, as I said earlier, is such a pain in the ass. Okay, that's better. Now is that one flat? No, that one could do with a bit of work. So we go in the back to give me a bit more leverage, and then we twist. There we go. That's about as good as it's going to get. So we'll just accept that. Actually, what's interesting is this does have a AA arm suspension setup for it as well. And the thing they specifically mention about it is it gives you more steering angle. So I'm very tempted to see how much steering angle this has out of the box, and whether or not the double wishbone AA arm suspension gives you more steering angle, and whether or not you could use this racing chassis as a drift chassis. I don't know if the suspension setup will make it partial to a drift chassis. But who knows, and honestly, who cares? I like doing stupid things. So, okay, we're going to need the springs now. One other interesting thing is, if you are watching this video from the start as playback on YouTube, is this is definitely picked up in speed as I've gone further into the instructions. So that's always a big win. We'll use a file, I think, to open this. Perfect. And just a shout out to everyone who's been trying to troll me on stream today. I definitely appreciate you at least watching. Okay, let's put those away before I lose more of them. And put those ones away. And now we're trying to untangle the springs. There we go. When you throw, you need to rotate this anti-clockwise to take them out. Okay, so let's put them in. And they just slide onto the thread of the screws, which is what they're talking about when they're saying they get retained. And that's why you have to unwind them very, very carefully. So you just want to make sure that they are actually going onto those spring centers, those screw centers. Now we move on to some more of the rear suspension setup. This is going together blindingly quickly. My voice is cracking like a teenager. Which means I'm probably a bit dehydrated at the moment. So for this we need self-retaining ball heads. Well, not self-retaining, we need ball heads with a screw end already pre-built into them. Now there are multiple different types of those, so you have to pay attention to which one you grab out of the pile. They do have tiny ones and large ones, and they want the large ones, which are the 3.5mm ones. .5mm washers. Now these don't need any screws at the bottom because they will just drill in on their own. And this rear, I guess you'd call it U-shaped thing, is actually directional. If you have a look, it's got some lighter carbon fiber parts on the edges. But more importantly, the countersunk screws, where my bottom finger are, so here and here, point up. So just make sure you observe that when you put it together. Okay, so they go on the outside. So I hold the Allen key and the bolt with my fingers like that and just twist from the top. This also helps me keep everything straight, but it does mean that if I need to apply some pressure, I can just grab the tool like that and force it down. Doesn't need much force, just a tiny bit, but sometimes that's all you need to get the initial cut in place. And once it has cut and dug in, it should go in fairly automatically. And once again, it's carbon fiber, so you don't need to force it or anything like that. The friction from the carbon fiber should actually keep it in place. Welcome to live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Huh. Wonder what those guidelines are. Okay. Did they go in straight? Close enough. I can force it a bit. So that time I actually had to bite in incorrectly, but I was able to just apply a bit of force right at the beginning to realign it. And now that's cutting in straight and true. Cool. So there you go. I've got the balls in place on there. I realise I should be acknowledging the audience and showing these parts off a bit more. It's a bit easy to get very, very focused on this stuff, and I'm not sure what I'm doing. Now they're asking for an M26, but I don't know I don't think I've got any of those M26s. Like I only have seen M24s here. How big is that? You are... that's a 12. Yeah, that's like a 9. Oh, actually, was that a Phillips head? No, that was a flat head. Okay, so I do have the M26 for that. One of you in that case. So the dimensionality of the screws is always a bit of a problem. I don't know who's to blame for that. I'm not necessarily going to hold atomic for that. That has always seemed to be something that's the same with a lot of manufacturers. But maybe it'd be nice if they had like something you'd compare on a printout, or maybe where they're making the measurements from. Maybe they're just like give or take 10% or something. I don't know. Now that's interesting. Ah, okay, I see how that's done. That's really, really weird. So I guess that the damper tubes go on these outside bits. The spring just seems to be pushing up against the top. It doesn't look like it's necessarily retained by anything, which is a weird way of doing it, but I'll show you what I mean in a second. So let's drill into this a bit more. Tight screws. So the springs are just about here, and there's no actual pin from the top keeping them in place. They're just literally resting against this metal part here. But there is one hole on the outer side here, but I'm guessing that's for the damper tubes to go in. But as you can see, the chassis is now bending down because of that, and is springing back, which is kind of cool. So that means it looks like you can adjust the side-to-side spring rate very, very easily, which is kind of awesome. Although not the dampening. So normally what you set the dampening, you use the springs for... I'm going to back that screw out actually. Normally you use springs for setting like the ride height, and then you set the damper for how much to lose. Oh, that's why that's actually rounded out. That screw is no good for me. Use the dampers to set how much you lose in each bounce or spring or whatever. So springs absorb and re-inject energy, whereas dampers just lose energy. They normally convert it to heat. Hence they dampen, whereas the springs will only slightly dampen because they do lose some energy but mostly retain. So yeah, you set up your suspension mainly with the dampers, and you set your ride height with the springs. There is a bit of cross in each way because dampers are not perfect dampers and springs are not perfect springs, but generally that's how it would go. So these rotating things allow you to set the ride height on either side, or the ride height of the rear, which is kind of interesting. Actually, I'm going to go full-blown pliers here, because I've got a feeling that's slipping. I basically rounded out that hex bit, so I can't actually tighten it all the way I need to. Let's hope I've got a spare. Oh, maybe I didn't get a spare. That's a bit worrying. It's actually exceptionally worrying if I don't have a spare. also seems weird that those are recessed. They don't really need to be. So that's a ball head. I suspect that's too long. Yeah, that's too long. So this is looking to me like they've cut down on the amount of screws they give you. Which is good in some ways because they always gave you way too many screws in the past, but if that means I've got no spares for things like this, that puts me in a bit of a pinch. No, that's not a flat head. Oh, that'll do. I was also kind of surprised that that rounded out almost immediately. Like I could feel it rounding out. That one's rounded out. Maybe it's this one then. Oh no, okay. Maybe it's actually just the hex piece I've got is rounded out. Okay. That's a screwdriver. That. One moment while I find the parts I need. It's not that one. Okay, so it's actually pretty large. Huh. Maybe one of these big ones? No. Oh, maybe one of these boxes has it. Yep, that'll do it. So now we can go back to using my good screwdriver. So that's what happens when you're not using hardened tools. Very easy to strip them out. Oh, this is so much easier and quicker. I should have done this before I started the stream. Let's find these ones. In fact, that's a good opportunity to quickly go over all my bolts and just quickly tighten them up. Cool. Perfect. Okay, what do they want next? They want an M24 with a pole in the middle. Steel post. And where does the steel post come from? What was the bag they last asked me to open? Bag 9. That was bag 9. So that pole is actually in bag 6. So this bag here. So once we get to the rear diff and front setup, I am going to stop there. And I'm going to spread this over to videos. We are at an hour and a half, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing that. That, and I really badly need a drink at this point. And I think doing a 4 or 5 hour stream is not really quite what I want to be doing today. So what you do is you partially twist it in until it's tight, back it off half a turn, and then you just rotate it in the direction it needs to be. Now I'm trying to work out what the significance of that hole is, and honestly I can't see one, so we are just going to tighten it up in any random direction. In fact, we're having a look at the instructions coming up. We might stop a bit early because there's parts that involve super glue, and I don't want to really do any super glue at the moment. Alright. Holes in. Apply instant glue. Well, I do have the instant glue here, so maybe we'll give it a go. Now I did put those plastic parts over here. So what I think we'll do is I'll get the glue started, and then we will come back tomorrow and continue then, and we may even be able to finish it in that time frame. Now this is super glue. You definitely don't want to get it on the table. One of the interesting things about super glue is that it uses moisture to, as an accelerant to, I guess, finish the bond, and it can use moisture in your fingers, which is why they recommend you never touch it with your fingers, because you will glue them together just because of the moisture content. Now I am actually particularly dry and the humidity is fairly low, but I'm still not going to risk it. So I've actually got two parts here. I've got an accelerator and I've got the actual glue itself. Now this is for a different project that I've worked on, but it's equivalent to super glue. So the trick here will be getting everything in place without using my fingers. Yep, that'll do. Yeah, I might have to use a tissue to clean things. I'm just hoping that doesn't catch. Put a bit of glue here. Okay, so that has sealed up, and I'm going to use a pair of cheap pliers to reopen that. Yep, that's been opened. Put a bit of glue there. Just make sure it's working. Very carefully do this. Okay. So there's a bit of a bubble there. Let's clean this tool off. As long as you don't get water onto it, very easy to clean off. The moment you get any water onto it at all, even just breathing on it, it'll harden back up. This is one thing I didn't like about this design, so. Get this glue flowing again. Still looks like it doesn't want to come out, which is a bit annoying. So what I might actually do in that case is just end it here. Thanks for watching so far. Expect another build video today or tomorrow. Tomorrow or the day after. In the interim, keep on building, and hope to see you soon. Thanks for joining me.